So probably the last main event of the day is a panel discussion on the local value of technology in streetscapes from our testbed perspectives. So very grateful to our moderator and a partner here with CS3, Bill Kenworthey, who's principal and regional leader of HOK, where he directs planning and urban design initiatives across the Northeast. He will lead the panel discussion, joined by Vijay Rajvanshi from Middlesex County. They're basically the owner of the Data City testbed. Working also recently with Brian Cobb from CVG Airport. And unfortunately, Chris Rug came down with a flu, so he won't be able to join us from the city of West Palm Beach. But very graciously, Jason Hallstrom, who works very closely and is sort of the, let's say, the technical lead on the West Palm Beach testbed, has agreed to fill in for Chris. So thank you very much and welcome you all to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Andrew. So I'm just going to jump in since you did our introductions. And we're going to start with Jason today. Jason, local governments handle quality of life issues every day, but with limited tax dollars and rising costs, maintaining the standards people expect is a constant challenge. From a city's perspective, where does technology create real value at the street level?
So thanks for the question. So I'm going to start by saying that I'm a poor substitute for Chris Rug. I'm really sorry that he wasn't able to join. He's also really sorry. For folks who don't know Chris, he's really been with us from the beginning. He's an amazing supporter of CS3, an incredible advocate for the program, both within Florida and beyond. So I know he feels badly that he couldn't make it. I'm going to do my best to channel my inner Chris and to share some of what I've learned from working with him. And I think that if Chris were sitting here, what he would say is that it always begins with community. So, of course, Chris is the executive director of the CRA within West Palm Beach. And everything the CRA does is, I think, in many ways, parallel to the way that we think about the development of streetscape technology. And so it all begins with understanding what are the community needs, what are the sensitivities, how do those needs, sensitivities, perceptions, how do those change over time? So in West Palm Beach, we've been very lucky that the city has continued to invest both financially and time, not just with us, but with a much larger ecosystem that we're really grateful to be a part of, in looking at how do you use sensing technology, analytics technology, smart streetscapes technology to understand how, really if and how, basic needs within the community are being met. And when those needs may not be met, what are some solutions that might be applied? So I'll try to make that a little bit more concrete. When we started working with the city now back in 2017, the fundamental problem that the city had identified is really missing a basic need, both within the downtown corridor and in the historic Northwest neighborhood, which is an adjacent residential neighborhood, was human mobility. So challenges in getting to where folks needed to be. So getting from home to work, getting from a neighborhood that had been historically a little bit disconnected from the downtown. And of course, it's the downtown where all of the job opportunities were, where the growth was happening. And so that's where the mobility testbed came from. Andrew talked about it this morning. You may have seen some posters that talked about it. And so the testbed began with a lens focused entirely on human mobility, answering three really fundamentally human questions. Where do people want to go? How do they get there? What are the challenges they face along the way? And that has informed mobility strategy since about 2019 to help meet some of those basic needs, and now we're expanding.
Great. VJ, what are the biggest mobility challenges in Middlesex County, and how does the Data City Smart Mobility Testing Ground drive those solutions?
Thank you, Bill. Do you still want me to introduce myself?
No?
Oh.
Took care of that already.
All right. So Middlesex County is the second most populous county in the state of New Jersey. And it's characterized by heavily urbanized and dense transportation network, roadway network. We, as a county, persistently face very high traffic volumes, traffic congestion, high pedestrian volumes throughout our network, our downtown cores, and a disproportionately high number of fatal and severe injury crashes. To address those challenges, those safety challenges, requires a data-driven and scalable solution. So Data City is our test bed. As some of you might know, it's a 2.2-mile section of roadway, which is fully equipped with state-of-the-art sensors, providing us LiDAR point cloud data, high-definition video with edge compute and state-of-the-art communications technology. So we are able to do a lot of analytics on the data that we capture. Through the technologies that have been developed, tested, and now validated through the Data City test bed, we are now able to implement those safety solutions because Data City gives us the ability to identify those high-risk safety hotspots where we can implement engineering and policy interventions. We can dynamically modify our signal phasing to address real-time traffic needs or demands to make sure that we are addressing the mobility and transportation flow requirements for, in that moment. We are able to identify pedestrians in crosswalks, so we can modify the walk phase, for instance, to ensure there's more a safer environment for pedestrians to cross the roads. And we're also able to identify the pedestrian movement patterns throughout the test bed and link that to our transit operations. So we are responding to where the pedestrians need the transit options. And obviously, all of this comes together because then we are able to advance the county's Vision Zero objectives by reducing the fatal and severe injury crashes. So that's how we're doing it there.
And how are you leveraging technology investments in smart city streetscapes to develop new revenue streams that help offset those costs?
So this testbed started in 2019, and and actually became operational between 2019 and 2021 is when we were doing the instrumentation. We've made great progress since then, but since 2021, we've been able to generate a really rich real-world data set. Just to give you a sense, we have about 60 billion trajectory data points at this point, over 2 petabytes of data collected. And as we all know, high-quality mobility data is a valuable commodity. And most of the autonomous and connected vehicle companies are hesitant to share that data because that's proprietary. So we come from a point where we have this really feature-rich data, and we want to monetize it, right? Create a revenue stream to offset some of our investment costs using that data. By collaborating with private sector automobile manufacturers, research institutions such as Columbia, such as Rutgers University, and also local governments. In addition to all of that, the autonomous vehicle manufacturers have the ability now to bring their next generation AV technology, test it in the digital twin that has been created for our test bed, and then validate that same technology in the live test bed. So that's providing further opportunities for collaboration and revenue generation.
So Brian, you're up next. Airports are often seen as transportation assets, not cities. How does CVG's experience mirror what cities and counties on this panel are facing?
Thank you, Bill, and great to be with everyone. Not expecting to see an airport today, did you? Take what Jason said, take what Vijay said, and just pull it into a very tight micro municipality. That's what an airport is. We're dealing with the exact same challenges, exact same interest, and the exact same needs. And how are we moving forward? Frankly, we're moving forward with folks like yourself. So we're building what the future is, how best we can model what an asset is. And frankly, that's where it comes into play in the U.S. I'm going to go into a little bit more specific. I'm sure many of you have flown out of LaGuardia and JFK. They were bashed years ago about just optically how they compared to the world airports. They've vastly improved. But what we don't necessarily know behind the scenes is that is not U.S. investment. That's actually international investment that's plugging money into U.S. airports. Then you take an airport like ours in Cincinnati. So the investment back in the day was from one of the major airlines. That major airline, as we're familiar with, went through some very challenging economic times, and we lost our hub status. And that also meant that there was a tremendous amount of infrastructure that was left behind. And that responsibility came our way. So how do we make an airport financially viable? Through technology. And that's how an airport ended up with the chief innovation officer. First of all, it was to deliver on who's going to take care of the customer when we're no longer a hub and that dominant airline no longer necessarily cares about the customer. Who cares about the customer that's flying on the non-dominant airline that felt like they were being treated like a third world country? So it was level setting first and foremost and delivering on the experience, just like a city. How are we pulling individuals out of the city and getting them to jobs? Then what's the new technology? The new technology aspect is absolutely how do we R&D, how do we start scaling, and how do we take it to parallel industries? A parallel industry being a municipality. So from that perspective, that's how we've secured all of these opportunities with autonomous ground vehicles, with sensing technology. And I'll end on, there hasn't been truly one statement since I've been here at 2 o'clock that I didn't hear that doesn't have an application in the airport. So bravo to all of you. Super excited to be here and just continue this conversation. Thanks, Bill.
Great. I'll follow up with what lessons can airports offer cities when pilots succeed, but traditional financing models break down?
Absolutely. That traditional financing aspect, now we're back to the government component. So in the US, we'll go back, there are usually 2 forms of airports and how they're run. One is a traditional city asset. So they report to the city, that's how they receive their funds. You have to do battle with the city to make sure that you get your budget, et cetera. So that's about half. The other half are airports like us, which are independent authorities. So we have a full board that we're responsible to and we report up to. The benefit of our board is it's made up of Fortune 500 types, and the rest are self-made individuals that are very successful in what they did. What they immediately got in a post-D-Hub environment is that customer experience aspect, and I can't overstate that. The customer experience aspect and why they picked up on that is in their day-to-day jobs, in their companies that they ran, they knew how they developed streams of revenue was, number one, produce a great product and separate yourself by brand recognition. Number two, R&D and figure out what you're going to do to stay ahead of the competition. How does that apply to us? We had to establish a brand, which airports aren't known for. Why did we have to establish a brand? Because we have 5 competing airports right on top of us. The only kind of comparison to that is really New York with the number of airports that you have around. In our situation, we're a very drive-centric capital. We don't have trains or rail systems like you do. So individuals have choices. That choice is either turn left or right out of the driveway, which airport I go to. Then the next aspect is, how cheap is my airfare? We don't control the airfare, but we can certainly control and really guide what the experience is. And even if it's marginally more expensive, if the experience is better from a flow process, that I'm getting where I need to go without minimal hassle, then I'm good. I'm picking Cincinnati. So that's why we ended up pursuing that. to the point of now we start scaling product. As we were bringing those new products in to stay ahead of our competing airports, then it was very much, well, if we're applying our IP to these products, then why wouldn't we go into a relational deal with these organizations that says, how about a revenue share aspect to this? So we have revenue contracts. We have 2 patent pendings, 5 license agreements of selling our products. So super, super unusual for an airport to be doing this.
So, Vijay, we're going to take you next on the funding operation. What is the county's approach to partnerships, to developing, implementing, and evaluating technology pilots?
Thank you, Bill. So, Middlesex County has had a long-standing relationship with Rutgers University, Center for Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation, Rutgers-Kate, which is a partner with CS3. What that means is that Rutgers serves as an extension arm for us for research and development. And that has helped us tremendously in ways that we couldn't even imagine, 6 years ago. We are able to fund the research and development of innovative technology, such as what we're talking about today, by funding that research for Rutgers. And in turn, the county gets the opportunity to implement that, tried and tested technology throughout our county, which is, in my opinion, much cheaper than, doing it differently. In addition to that, the county is now reaching the point with this test bed where we've validated the science behind this technology, and now we are at the point where we are ready to commercialize the data, like I was saying earlier, but also actively engage with external entities, both public sector and private sector, to attract them, to bring them to the county as an economic development measure, and identify and develop, evaluate those pilots for 3 things. That helps us reduce the risk that the county is taking, right? It helps us accelerate the innovation from the county's perspective, obviously. And then third, obviously, we've made tremendous amount of investment towards this test bed. We can offset that and bring in new novel technology, not just for transportation, but other aspects of local governance. So just to give you a reference, we're right now in the process of setting up a transportation network operations center within the county, which is not very usual for a county government to do. And Middlesex County would be the first within the state to do that. It's a massive facility. Right now, for instance, Data City operates in a roughly 7,000 square feet control center facility. We're moving that, or upscaling that to almost 30,000 square feet, and 3 times the control center space that we have for Data City. What that means is that, on the one hand, we have this transportation technology that we are testing. We are then also able to bring the advanced traffic management system, the flood modeling and stormwater modeling systems that the county is now in the process of developing. The county is also making tremendous investments into public infrastructure through our CIO project, which is a massive $350 million project for building sports facilities, student facilities within the Middlesex College campus. As part of that, we've initiated the building information management and automation management systems, which will help us manage the life cycle costs for these facilities. So we are bringing all of that, working with Rutgers-Kate, into the control center or the network operations center, which will help us with governance and service delivery.
Great. And Jason, you want to speak a little bit about the partnerships and implementation of the West Palm testbed pilot?
Yeah, absolutely. So in maybe thinking through those partnerships are always driven by value creation or potential value creation. And so when we think about how are we creating value in the city of West Palm Beach through the test bed, I think we have to look at the ways in which technology is directly impacting people's lives. And so when we began CS3, and maybe a little bit before that, when we began the test bed in West Palm Beach, it was all focused on data collection. And so perhaps to borrow some language that Andrew taught me recently, if we just focus on data collection, it makes us urban scientists. If we do something with that, if we engineer solutions around that and automate things around it, that's streetscape engineering. It's a little bit different. I think we've seen several examples today of concrete applications that drive value and partnerships. And so maybe the way I'll answer this is I'll give my perspective on this, and then perhaps I'll talk a little bit about what I've learned from Chris. So VJ referenced one example in Data City. This is, I think the example is actually led by Peter Jin. In that example of detecting pedestrians within a crosswalk so that you can affect crosswalk timing to protect the pedestrians in the crosswalk, that is a direct example of collecting data, actuating, and creating value for residents. That drives partnerships. That drives real value. We saw a great example today from Mehmet in Mehmet's presentation of taking data, collecting that data, and now looking at how can we actuate with that data through applications that allow more informed decision-making by drivers, by pedestrians, by automated vehicles. Again, those applications, that drives real value. We saw this in the student presentations. Emily gave a presentation today about LitterNet and using computer vision technology to be able to effectively determine where litter is taking place. And it's 90 seconds, so there's only so much time. But if she had more time, what she would have talked about is what you do with that information. You use that information to understand not just that there was litter, but the type of litter, the type of material that was there, and you use this to inform urban design. I'll make this concrete, this technology will ultimately be deployed in Heart and Soul Park. That is an anchor public space in the historic Northwest in West Palm Beach. And the idea here, the intent here, is to use LitterNet and LitterNet-like tools to be able to understand, for example, if plastic bottles tend to accumulate 20 feet away from the recycling can, perhaps the recycling can is in the wrong location. It's a small example, but it's an important example because it helps to protect the vitality of that public space. That's really the heart of the historic Northwest community. So those are just some examples that we've seen today of how you connect streetscape applications, data collection, to actuation, to having an impact, to driving value, which creates partnerships, which drives partnerships. One of the things that I've learned from Chris that was quite unexpected is that the technology that we're deploying in West Palm Beach, and I believe this is true across all the test beds, is that it's creating, I don't want to say they're realized yet, but it's creating new opportunities for non-tax revenue through new public-private partnerships. This is not something, certainly nothing that I expected when we began the CS3 adventure, but it's something that we can see beginning. So sort of we see the blossoms. We can see that this is going to bear fruit. I think it's an incredibly exciting opportunity.
Great. And have there been any unexpected developments at the center in Palm Beach? And any unexpected developments?
Oh, every day is unexpected. Chris got the flu. Let's see, what else? No, I've mentioned before and had an opportunity to share with the board a little bit earlier, we're serious about community engagement. This isn't a talking point. Every member of our center across all three of our test beds, we know the communities we serve. We invest in the communities we serve. We spend time to understand what it is that they're looking for. So I'll give you a concrete story. We had built the mobility test bed, which became the West Palm Beach test bed in the downtown corridor. So that's all along about 800 linear meters down Clematis Street, which is the heart of the downtown. And we built this system, and we had this great pedestrian mobility system and great visualization products, and we were so jazzed up. And we went to the historic Northwest, and we were like, oh, you're going to love this. Look at this amazing pedestrian mobility problem. They're like, yeah, but what about the raccoons? We're like, what about the raccoons? They said, yeah, the big problem is not mobility within the neighborhood. Raccoons are a problem. Well, one of the great things about being a part of an incredible team of faculty and students and staff and engineers and industry partners and government partners is you got lots of folks you can lean on. And so we partnered with Lehman College, had an amazing student from Lehman College and faculty at Lehman who helped us to build new models that could identify raccoons. And then, of course, we took those models, we integrated them within our testbed tool set to be able to begin mapping raccoon activity, right? So it's like the pedestrian mobility testbed for raccoons. And then, of course, what do you do with it? Well, there's action behind that. That informs pest management solutions. It informs where the city ought to invest. It informs where concrete needs to be put beneath slabs to prevent the raccoons from further nesting, and so on and so on and so on. So a lot of unexpected things pop up in the community meetings that we have. That's one of my favorites.
Mine too now. VJ, related to AI, how do you cut through the hype and decide what's actually worth funding at the county level?
That's a great question. So just for reference, Middlesex County, like I mentioned, it's the second largest county in the state by population. We have about 250 signalized intersections. And throughout our roadway network, and we manage that with very limited staff and physical resources, much like any government entity. If AI, which is what we are heading towards, if AI can help us monitor the traffic feeds and the sensor data that's coming in from our network constantly, right, without people actually monitoring video feeds from all of these intersections, and identify traffic patterns before they escalate into problems, right? And issue timely alerts to us, then that's valuable information that we can use, right? We can focus our attention to where it matters most for us. That is, in my opinion, a much more efficient way to manage our mobility network than, like I said, people doing that manually. So that's where we are channeling our investments at this point. I just want to piggyback on what Jason was saying in terms of partnerships. Like I said, we've validated the effectivity of this technology. And at this point, we've made a conscious decision at the county level that we have 14 intersections as part of our testbed at this point. To get to a smart, completely smart network, we need to take baby steps, right? So we've, starting this year, we've incorporated the smart infrastructure as part of our capital improvements program. Every year, we do corridor improvement projects, signalized intersection projects for approximately 25 intersections. Starting this year, we've incorporated that into the program. The hope is that within 10 years, we'll reach the point where the entire system is going to be providing this information to us. And the end state for this is, obviously, there's information coming in for the vehicular traffic, for the pedestrian movements. All of that is very good, but using the student resources that are accessible to us through Rutgers, we are able to, the students are helping us, I should say. The students are helping us build models where they can predict a crash before it happens, even if that's a second or a second and a half before that happens. That's really important for us. So that's where we're going.
Great. And Brian, how do you decide what's worth testing in a complex environment like the airport when it comes to AI?
Who went to CES this past year? Anyone? All right. See a couple hands. Everything had AI. Everything. All right. That's hype, flat out. So step one is, what do you have in AI as far as your product? And give us some kind of realistic definitions, not proven fact, but just some definitions of around what you think AI is. And we by no means are experts as an airport. That is not our forte. which, by the way, that's why we partner with universities. So our partner universities tell us, is it BS? Or does it have some validity? The next tier is, what's the security that you're bringing to the table, regardless of AI? So is it going to be cyber secure? We have a big target on our back as an industry. And as an airport, and if you're not familiar with Cincinnati, we've gone from a major airline, commercial airline for passenger hub to cargo now. We're every bit of 60 to 70% cargo. DHL and Amazon Air. We're the only airport in North America to have 2 airlines hubbed at one location. Why are we a cyber target? Because if you take one of those airlines out, it'll be an impact to domestic economy. Take 2 of those, it's an international impact to the economy. By the way, down the street, by about an hour and 15 is Louisville, Kentucky, with UPS, 3rd largest cargo airport in the world. A little bit further down the street, by several hours, is Memphis. 2 states, 3 airports, 4 major cargo carriers. Just coincidentally, if you were to take 2 of those out, that would be a massive hit economically to the world economy. So we really have to be sensitive. That last tier is, all right, crawl, walk, run. What are we going to do to start building out our hypothesis? And just as Jason has shared and VJ has shared, then we start getting to like realistic delivery. So I'm tagging Andrew as my supervisor for the day to handle 6 different flights from contract company XYZ. So he's handling multiple airlines. And if you didn't know, airlines aren't necessarily staffing their flights with their own staff. They're contract employees. So they might wear the brand shirt, they're not necessarily wedded to the brand. That's where we kind of come in as the airport. We're kind of the ombudsman. So Andrew's trying to manage those 6 flights with this entire crowd. So typically for a narrow body aircraft, meaning like 130 seats or so, it's going to take about 6 people. Well, each one of those, we probably have some turnover. So now you're down to probably 5 on average per flight. You have a learning curve. So those individuals that are just trained and just working are trying to get up to speed. So they're not quite familiar with what their job is yet, but they'll figure it out. Then there's just flat out labor gap. So you might have illness. You can't keep the pipeline full. So there are challenges. So let's say about 4.5 people for what's supposed to be 6. And what's the major driver for any airline? Airline, not airport, labor and fuel. If I can save the day on labor and fuel, I'm winning. I'm an airport guy, former airline guy. So I understand a little bit about the airline economy. Why we're so hell-bent as an airport is back to that brand recognition and brand competition. In order to get an airline to fly into Cincinnati, we have got to figure out the economic goodness that we're going to deliver to them, and by gosh, we better deliver it. So back to Andrew's state, Andrew can't be at all 6 flights. Andrew's relying on old school technology like a radio. And maybe, just maybe, you have one individual at each of those 6 aircraft that's also carrying a radio, a lead. Probably not, though. That individual is probably looking at 2 flights, okay? It's a game of telephone, and it's been this way for decades. It's not realistic to try to figure it out and try to effectively get that flight to leave on time. Where AI, all the way back, Bill, where AI comes into play is, think about Alexa, think about Siri. You know, instead of push-pull, like how do we actually get the push messaging from AI that really is just analyzing everything that's happening on that aircraft from a servicing element? And the technology exists today. We actually have been using it for the better part of 5 years. Have not scaled it because it's not quite ready yet. But at the end of the day, it's much like the images that you've seen. It's our camera, it's our infrastructure, it's looking at the aircraft, and we told it specifically all of the service elements to look at. So at the same time, it's creating a Gantt chart. And it can start getting to, like Dr. White's vision is we've got to predict if the fueler's not there and it's going to take 20 minutes to fuel the aircraft and we have 15 minutes left, it's going to be a 5-minute delay, but by the time the fueler disconnects the hose, it's probably going to be 10. So how do we get it all the way back to the crew, flight crew, and all the way back to you as a customer that's sitting in the hold room, waiting for your flight to depart, wondering what is going on? And how do we get out ahead of that that says, we're terribly sorry, we're going to incur a slight delay. Here's a coupon for Dunkin's that's right next to the gate. And really kind of do customer recovery before it becomes a problem and an after the fact responsibility. But you can, I'm sure you can envision, as those ramp workers that I just asked you to be, how well that could feasibly run if you're just wearing a wearable or if you're wearing an earpiece, that you're receiving guidance at all times, not by one individual that's just spread too thin, but by a system that's looking at everything and only telling you the critical pieces that you need to know, not just random stuff. And I'll end on, now we're back to what VJ was describing, I think, VJ, and correct me if I'm wrong, but an integrated operations controls center, an IOCC. We are just like a city again. So we have people that are looking at just a flood of monitors. And one of the presenters said earlier, it's a flood of monitors. It's a flood of data. What should you be looking at? So we need to be using AI that's creating exceptions-based information and identifying that and alerting, here's the issue. And based on past history, you need to address it now or you're going to incur this, as opposed to just this flood of data. So many opportunities ahead of us. It's up to us to really try to leverage it. And hopefully I've encapsulated the fact that it's going to take a village. And it's certainly not just, one team, one person that's trying to say, well, this is what's going to happen. It's the team that says, here's what I'm bringing to the expertise. And I'll close on Dr. White's comment of, absolutely, we need the SMEs. We need the subject matter experts. But where those subject matter experts super accelerate is when they become kind of generalist, not in an HR term, but the generalist that understands how the business operates on the whole and how they plug in and how they impact the parallel departments or parallel operation. So,
Great. Jason, I'll let you either chime in on the topic of AI if there's something that has been spoken about here, or talk a little bit about privacy and how you keep.
Yeah, Bill, happy to. So when we are thinking about AI moving forward, we're focused on reliability, we're focused on uncertainty, we're focused on guardrails. So that's what we're looking at over the next 6.5 years, and hopefully longer than that. Well, perhaps we'll solve it within that time frame, but that's where we're moving. So we've heard already from Jorge a great presentation on CityOS, and although that presentation was largely focused on the data side of the data plus AI problem, it's important to keep in mind that that security architecture protects what the AI has access to. It protects the potential of privacy leakage under AI attacks, and so those things are tightly coupled. The other area that I think in some sense we've had an important realization about in the context of AI is that we're not going to get it perfectly right. So it's not going to be perfect. So maybe just by a show of hands, how many folks out here use ChatGPT or Claude or something like this? Yeah, like everybody. So how many of you have been frustrated with the tool because it just gets the damn stuff wrong sometimes? Yeah, like everybody, right? And so is AI going to get better? Absolutely. Is it going to get exponentially better? Seems super likely, yes. Is it going to get to 100% accuracy? Doesn't look that way, not in the near future. So if we take something really simple, I mean, so years and years ago, no, not so many years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, students would ask me in class, should we be worried about AI? And I said, oh, don't worry about AI. I can't even distinguish cats from dogs. Like this isn't a problem, of course. That's changed fundamentally. But if we take that old example, the stuff still can't identify cats from dogs with 100% reliability. That's kind of a cute and fun example, but that becomes really serious when you're trying to identify a truck approaching a pedestrian lane or a motorcycle getting too close to a bicycle lane. 99.9% certainty is awesome. And for research publications, that's also pretty darn awesome. But when you're controlling, when you're actuating to protect human health, human safety, 99.9 is just not good enough. And so a major pivot for us, or maybe it's not a pivot exactly, it's a strength and commitment to looking at new approaches to decision-making under uncertainty. So taking these increasingly powerful black boxes that can identify anomalies in airports, that can sort of sift through the haystack to find the needle most of the time, you treat those things as black boxes that offer you some level of certainty that's not quite what you want it to be, and then figuring out how do you build robust systems on top of that. Forgive me for the folks who have heard this analogy before, but there was a similar initiative back in the mid-90s, maybe a little earlier than that, with Windows, whatever came before 95, I suspect Steppen knows, Windows 3.1 or something, is that right? Does that sound right to people? You weren't born at the time. That makes me incredibly sad. I don't want to talk to you anymore. So Windows 3.1, whatever the thing was that came before Windows 95, it was super flaky, right, as was Windows 95. But it turned out that the DoD and the federal government had to rely on those systems, and so there was a major, major investment through the DoD, through the Fed, that was focused on how do you build reliable systems foundations on top of unreliable substrates. I think that's where we need to focus. Luckily, the foundation isn't quite as unreliable as Windows 3.11 or Windows 95. But it's got some issues. So that's what we're focused on within the center moving forward. And maybe just one other point that we haven't talked about, bringing it back to community, is that the issues we're talking about here, they're incredibly complex. And the landscape that we're operating on top of is changing faster than we can track, and we're in the trenches. So it's hard to keep up. I mean, as an example, I've never seen Mehmet's presentation on the topic that he presented until today. So there's stuff happening within the center that's hard to track. If you're not working in the space and you're not in the trenches, imagine how hard it is to keep up with what's changing. And if you're not able to keep up, if you don't have a good understanding of what the underlying technology can do and what the risks are, you can't participate with CS3 in any kind of co-design or shaping of the technology or any kind of informed decision-making because you don't understand the stuff well enough. So I think it's incredibly important for all of us, not just the center, for all of us within the ecosystem to continue to engage with the community in improving the legibility of this increasingly complex, fast-moving technology, so that our residents, our visitors, our business owners, our partners in the creation process, which, like the fundamental tenet of CS3, is that it only works if everyone has a seat at the table.
Great. Well, thank you to our panelists. We're going to open it up to the crowd. You have questions?
I'll pick up on Jason and we'll give you some time. I absolutely agree with Jason's comments. Dovetail into that change management. So as an organization and as a alleged researcher working with partners like you, we face day-to-day headwinds on, oh great, here comes the innovation guy with a new toy, and not interested. And frankly, it's taken us years to really understand culturally what the gist is. Shouldn't have taken years, but it does. And I know this happens in many, many organizations. It's only as effective as the leadership embraces it, but really where it takes off is where the frontline staff gets it and their buy-in is there and they feel is part of the process. And where we've continued to fall down previously on many of our pilots, tremendously successful pilots, but what we ended up doing is we kind of left out the frontline staffer who was responsible for delivering ultimately. We handed it to the business unit, the product, and said, here you go. Works great. It's awesome. And it died. Only because it was, well, we didn't know how it was used. We weren't part of the process. Or in some situations, it was being used half-heartedly only to find out, well, it's because we thought it was your project, me. So, you know, the dreaded, oh, with the title comes some pressure on people of they have to use it just because. No, that's not how this should work. So really what we've had to force ourselves to really re-engineer is it's storytelling. It's the art of storytelling of bringing you in and bringing our partners in from the frontline staff at the very beginning stage that says, we've vetted the researcher. We vetted the basics of the technology, and we believe it can work. And here's how. And it's kind of like a rough outline to the story. But then we turn it over to the frontline staffer to ask them, help us finish out the storyline. What's the narrative? And what's success look like? That, frankly, becomes your press release, your scope of work, your contract. So that's the model that we're abiding by. And again, I cannot overstate the aspect of the storytelling piece to get the buy-in from the frontline staffer that's responsible for delivering the product. Because at the end of the day, we have to respect, and when I say we, it's my very small team and the executive team of, look, we're putting a tremendous amount of pressure. It's a high-pressure environment, highly secure, little risk for error. You're talking about aviation, so we don't like risk by nature. So from that perspective, we put a lot of pressure on the staff as it is. Why would we ever just randomly put pressure on them to say, here, adopt this thing and good luck? So that's where the change management aspect comes in, very cautiously, very carefully, and very in almost a predictive manner of step 1, step 2, step 3. And if we can get through those steps successfully with you in it, then we absolutely will deliver a viable product. And a viable product to us is not just selfishly for CVG, not just selfishly for aviation, but how can we take it to parallel industries that also can win? And when you think about parallel industries, it's airports, obviously, from base 1, hospitals, college campuses, casinos. Like, we just happen to process a lot more people than those other venues. But at the end of the day, we're all processing people. So how can we help deliver products to those parallel industries?
I know that we have a question, but Brian, I just wanted to make one comment. I love your comments about storytelling. I think that's exactly what we have to do. And I just wanted to add that this isn't a one-time story. This is a story that you have to tell many times. It's a story that you have to repeat. It's a story that you have to adapt because our story impacts the story of our customers. For us, our customers are the communities we serve, and we have to hear their stories, adapt our stories, and this thing iterates and iterates and iterates. Because it's one thing to say, you know what, Brian, I'm going to try it. It's a whole nother thing to say, I'm going to use it next week, and I'm going to use it the week after. So I think your comments are spot on.
Except for that raccoon that's like,
Yeah, that's right. Raccoon's like, shut up about that story, guys.
You have a question?
So I work for an industry lab, and my background is also coming from a product side where I was basically building the stuff, and I would be one of those vendors who would knock on your door, hey, I have a fantastic product, and you should try it out. So I've been on both sides of the pond. And also, even from current role, working with a lot of academia or public and private sector parties on the collaborations, on the innovation and so on. There are diverse the priorities that I must look at. Now, from your point of view, now you're representing public sector, academia, and private sector. There's no lack of the vendors that knock on your door, right? And there's no shortage of universities that will want your funding for research projects. So what are the top priority criteria that you look for from those potential collaborator or potential vendor eventually, right? What are those that you're looking for to move the needle?
all right. First of all, we don't, I think we're a little bit unusual from this perspective. We don't go into it with a problem statement. So we do listen to a tremendous amount of pitches. Absolutely, there's no lack of pitches. The reason we don't go into it with a problem statement, and frankly, we don't like to identify ourselves as an airport, is the first thing from your side, and we'll use you as kind of like an innovator, is that airport, oh, my product doesn't work at an airport. Again, it goes back to the micro municipality. It's actually a city. So how do you actually trial it in our location and put it in front of 9 million eyes a year? And that's just travelers, but you get the scale, I think. The next aspect is, as we're listening to the pitch, oh, we didn't even think about that, frankly. So it's, again, it's a learning exercise of just don't go into it with these guardrails that we do aviation, we do airports, and that's it. So we intentionally created a broad approach. The next here is if you make it that far and we think that there's a relationship there, then the relationship really kind of doubles down on, are you willing to change the product as it is today? If you're not, that's okay. It's just not a good relationship for us. If you're willing to modify the project or product based on what we're providing you from an input perspective, and it could be IP, then if that's for you, let's go. That's where we really hit the spark. Then beyond that, it's really, does it involve transportation, autonomous vehicles? Does it move, basically? Does it connect? So someone presented before the importance of APIs. Absolutely, we are doubling down, tripling down, et cetera, on APIs. If you don't have an API, or if it's locked down API, we're not interested. Got to go. The next piece is it secure? So again, airports, we used to think of them as physical secure environments. Now it's more cyber in a tremendous way. And then the last piece is it clean? What are we doing from a community aspect to make sure that we're behaving as a good community advocate for clean streams, creeks, rivers, and frankly, in the pandemic, no other thing was proven more successful than our launch of our autonomous floor scrubber. People thought that we intentionally bought that for the pandemic. We didn't, actually. We bought it simply because of what I shared with you before. Labor concerns, high frequency environment for customers, and our hypothesis was pretty basic. If we were, as housekeepers, to shut down a section of floor and try to clean it throughout the day, customers would be super angry. Why would you do that in the middle of the day? I'm telling you, we've run robots now for the better part of 6 years. They don't care. In fact, they think it's pretty cool. And it becomes this social hit that we never anticipated. But along with that robot, and we'll end on this, what we had to tell people is, and this is why we were so interested in making sure, like a robotic company just didn't look at us as an airport, is that we shared with them very early on, all those years ago, you're not a cleaning bot. You're not. And like the look of stun on their face. For us, you're a security bot because you're running cameras all the time. So it's a new opportunity for cameras. You can detect items. So from a bag left behind that you hear over the PA system, yeah, we look for those bags that are left behind. And then the other aspect is you're a mapping company. And that's why we are 100% into the LiDAR aspect, because we constantly want to ingest all of those data points at any time that bot is running. So we can take data points from that bot, this bot that's operating outside, that bot that's somewhere else, and they're not all the same company bots. So again, someone else presented, what's the common platform that they're all ingesting into a digital world for everything that we've really been talking about today?
Thank you for that. And thank you to all the panelists. We're at time. I'm going to turn it back over to Andrew.
Thank you again, Bill, Brian, VJ, and Jason, channeling.